Hey everyone, it's Amanda from Wayward and Whimsical Creations, and today I am going to be showing you how to weave the dragon scale weave. Dragon scale is one of my absolute favorite weaves. I just love the look of it. Named thusly because the rings overlap and mimic the look of dragon scales. Dragon scale is best made with large rings that have an AR of at least 6 and small rings that have an AR or aspect ratio of at least 4. And it's a weave that can be made in multiple sizes. The smallest one here is 20 gauge 3/16 with 1/8. This middle one here is 18 SWG 1/4 inch with square 18 SWG 3/16. And then this one here is 16 SWG 3/8 and 1/4 inch. But again, large rings with an AR of 6, small rings with an AR of 4. Rule of thumb for dragon scale is your small ring should be able to sit nestled in the center of your large ring comfortably. Let's get into how to make it. To start, we are going to create a 1-in-1 chain that alternates our large rings and our small rings. So we're going to go one large ring, one small ring, large, small, and then we're going to end on a large. And if you wanted to make your piece wider, you could make this chain as long as you wanted, just as long as you start and end on a large ring. So next up, we're going to take a large ring, we're going to close it. We are going to place it over the top of one of the small rings like this. And then we are going to lock it in place by weaving large rings through the small ring. And before I do my other large ring, I need to place another large ring over our other small ring. So it looks like this. And then to lock it in place, we're going to go through both of the small rings. And then we're going to add another large ring going through this small ring here. So to start, what you end up with is actually a bit of helm weave. And it looks like this. So you've got 3 large rings, and then in between those 3 large rings are sandwiched 2 large rings that go around our small rings. So now to continue the dragon scale weave, we need to add small rings to the outside of our inner large rings. So we're going to add a ring here, 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 and here. They're going to sit underneath these middle rings here and sit inside the large rings. So I'm picking up the 2 large rings that are sandwiched And then I'm also going to add small rings to the ends. So one here. And one here. So then it should look like this. So we have small rings added to our sandwiched large rings. And then we're going to add a couple more small rings underneath the ones we just added, picking up the rings that are laying on top, the large rings that are laying on top. So one here. And one on the other side. So it should look like this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add large rings. Our next set of large rings are going to go through these small rings here and around this small ring. And then we're going to do it again on this side. So around this small ring and through the ones that sit above it. So it should look like this so far. And then what I like to do with my dragon scale is I like to taper one end down to a singular ring, and then I flip my work over and work from the other side, just because it makes it a little easier for me to weave it that way. I feel like I have a secure starting point. So we're going to take a small ring, and we're just going to pick up these two large rings that are sitting on top. And then we're going to take a large ring, going through the two rings that sit above the ring we just added and around this singular jump ring. So when you're done, it should look like this. Ooh. So then what I like to do is I like to flip my work over. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. We're going to add jump rings to the two rings here that are sitting underneath the top large rings. So we are adding a jump ring here. In the middle here. So see how it's sitting inside this large ring on top, but it's picking up the two large rings that are sitting underneath. And then the same on the end, picking up the ring that's underneath, and our small ring is sitting inside the large ring that's on the top. Now we're going to add 2 more small rings underneath the 3 we just added. And they're going to be picking up our large rings on top and sitting inside the ring sandwiched underneath. There's 1. And there's 2. Now we're going to add our large rings. They are going to go through the small rings, like let's say this is row 1, row 2, row 3. They're going to go through, row 1, row 2, row 3. They're going to go through the small rings in row 2 and around the small rings in row 1. So through the rings in row 2, around the rings in row 1. Okay, now that we have our first little bit established, our next step is to add small rings to the 2 large rings we just added. So we're going to do 1 on this side, 1 in the center, and 1 on this side. So 1, 2, 3. Now we need to add 3 large rings that are going to sit around the small rings we just added. So again, if this is row 1 and this is row 2, we're going through the rings in row 2 and around the small rings in row 1. So through, and it's going to sit around this ring. The middle one, we're going through the rings in row 2, around the ring in row 1. Through the ring in row 2, around the ring in row 1. Now we're going to add 2 small rings. And they're picking up these 2 large rings here. And these 2 large rings here. And your pattern's going to alternate. You're going to do 2 small rings, 2 large rings, 3 small rings, 3 large rings. So again, this is row 1, this is row 2. Our large rings are going through the rings in row 2, around the small rings in row 1. Through and around. So your smaller rings are sitting nestled inside your larger rings. So now we're going to add small rings on this end, in the middle, and on this end. So there's our 3 small rings added. And you want to make sure that they're sitting correctly. So now we're going to add 3 large rings that are going to go around or orbit the small rings we just added. So again, if this is row 1 and this is row 2, we're going through the rings in row 2, around the rings in row 1. So through, and then it sits around. Through and around. And you're just going to keep working the pattern. So now we're going to add 2 small rings that pick up our 3 large ones we just added. So they pick up these 2, and then it sits inside the large rings underneath. Again, if this is row 1 and this is row 2, we are going to go through the rings in row 2 and sit on top of and around the rings in row 1. So we added 2 small rings. Now we have to add 2 large rings. So through the rings in row 2, around the ring in row 1. And then once you get the length made that you want to finish it off, when you get down to 2 rings in a row, we're going to add just a singular small jump ring and then a large ring around it, going through the rings that sit above it. And there you have it. That's how you make dragon